Hi, my name is Chal. I'm the Chief Technology Officer with DHI. You are sat in our demonstration and simulation environment. This is where we play. You can look on our website if you want to know more about exactly how we do that. But there's a basic mixture of change management, leadership, training, education, with using new types of digital infrastructure to help with data sharing. So that's the kind of combination of things we do here. As an innovation center, we cover a huge spectrum of health and care service developments. So a large part of what we do is get involved with quite deep specialists in hospital at home, for example. And we are not specialists in hospital at home, but we know enough about the broad trends around technologies, and we do a lot of co-design work with users. We've got a team of designers that spends all their time co-design with end users, be they professionals or patients. We basically try and amalgamate that knowledge and exchange it and draw out the generalizable components. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with my drawing with crayons hospital at home thing as a person who is not someone involved in hospital at home, just so you understand the way we kind of think about things and the kind of abstract we have to try and create around some of this stuff. So reading the nice 2017 review around hospital at home models across the UK, they basically do two things. They focus on earlier discharge and they focus on admission avoidance, right? So this is me again drawing in crayons. If I had to simplify this down to the basic premise of what we're trying to do, I think it's those two things, and please shout out if I've got this wrong. The current models are predicated on assessing and managing clinical risk by using hospital processes and technologies. Okay, and again, I'm not making any value judgments on that, but that's what we have learned how to do. There is an overlap, specifically and most sensitively, with digital telecare development. So a lot of the same safety, trust, privacy, home embedded thought processes, risk management thought processes are all there in falls detection, falls prevention, fire safety. So the first thing to note is I sit on a Scottish Government technical advisory group around telecare. Everything you've said, I could copy and paste into that world, and we'd be looking at mostly the same issues, mostly the same challenges, mostly the same enabling technologies. There's definitely obviously an overlap with digital self-management, population, public health, co-management thought processes around early detection, around self-management of long-term conditions in the community in a less acute context. And part of what I'm doing today here is just going on either side of hospital at home a little bit to sort of stretch and understand where the lines are and how these things start to merge together. And so I view it as a spectrum. So effectively, it's just a declining set of acute capabilities. As you become less acute, we're all trying to figure out, and this sounds awful, but we're all trying to figure out at what point we can stop doing the more expensive, more intense thing and start doing the more friendly, softer, cheaper thing, right? And that's effectively what we're talking about in both prevention, early discharge, and prevention of readmission. It's the fundamental underlying premise. But it is a spectrum. In my head, there's 5 things. There's 5 steps here. And hospital at home is you've managed to detach from hospital. You've used a lot of the same risk management thought processes to help the culture accept that move. And then the thought process then needs to be, okay, within the hospital at home model, how can we discharge someone into the next step down quicker? Because there are an emerging set of Internet of Things technologies that would allow us to continue observing someone even once we've moved out of that intense acute experience. And so we need to figure out a way of orchestrating the technology that allows us to fluidly move from one mode to another and quickly re-escalate back up into the mode before it if we need to. So that's the kind of thought process that I hear when I'm seeing the sorts of things we're talking about. And there will be multiple steps. So it's recognizing that again, it's a continuum. So with that in mind, and again, that might be my kind of very crude bird's eye kind of view, I'll just talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in other areas and how that, and I'll leave it to you to see how that might cross over into your world. I think that's an interesting We've got some graphics glitches going on today. That one on the third from the left. That's, I might keep that. It's digital. It looks digital. So I don't need to teach you to suck eggs. Policy across the Western developed world is moving from hospital, doctor, patient, medical to person, care, support, living. Okay? So again, I'm not going to dwell on that. One of the issues across all of the different domains we're in is that technology money is still spent in this left-hand side. Huge amounts of technology is spent in the left-hand side. Ever increasing and more precise robotic surgery methods, genomics, medical device interventions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's quite hard to make a case on the right-hand side because it's less sexy, and the outcomes are more diffuse because there's so many factors at play. We can't demonstrate output as easily. And from people familiar with the social determinants of health, so a public health model that basically says your health outcomes are the product of clinical care, physical environment, individual behavior, and social and economic factors. We have to always be cognizant that we can do some incredibly sophisticated things in the clinical world, but it is 20% of the impact. Okay, so the thing that interests me in the hospital at home model is the fact that having moved into that community care setting, having moved into the person's lived context instead of the kind of isolated hospital environment where we kind of have almost a kind of fake bubble around the person, having moved into that home context, what else can we use about their lived environment, their lived behaviors, their context to then help them rehabilitate, help them get back on with life? And obviously that's a heavy premise for the hospital home model is to blend and merge those lines. And the kind of exercises we do, so we've done 6 years of co-design and industry engagement market analysis, and we've got 225 personal data items, which might be address, GPS location, blood pressure, national insurance number, work history, and we map those against those social determinants of health. So broadly speaking, the quantity of types of personal data broadly aligns with the impact on someone's life, and you probably expect that to be the case. Again, the reason I show this is because at the moment we are in danger of focusing too much on the 15.6%, the clinical record. So what we're interested in is all the same capabilities we're using for hospital at home, all the underlying Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, new connectivity methods, new automation methods, could all just as easily be turned to getting the rest of that picture. Okay, smart meters, smart radiator thermostats, motion sensors, et cetera, et cetera. So in the telecare world, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about activities of daily living more broadly and how we can use those step up or step down. So, fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. So this is the scale application of the Internet of Things. People think we're in the Internet of Things now. We are barely in the soft, gentle hill land leading up to the mountain that will be the Internet of Things in terms of the amount of devices and the kind of connectivity and the kind of price point we're talking about. The ability to ambiently and passively sense data about our environment and connect that to our behavioral data is going to grow, become cheaper, and become more ubiquitous. And unfortunately, and I like the question about medical device regs, fortunately, this world is going to vastly outpace our ability to regulate it. So, in practical terms, what we do is we figure out how to blend those worlds. And it's often uncomfortable because a lot of the stuff we do isn't medically regulated, but it's the stuff people are using, it's the stuff people are comfortable with, it's the stuff we can get people to commit to for a medium to long term instead of the short term for the medical intervention. So we're trying to figure out ways of combining these different types of data from different places and understanding how and what we can trust and for what purpose. So the way we're doing that at the moment, and so when we talk about simulation to us is... Oh, okay, we're back. I'll just keep this awake. Simulation for us is using real systems, but simulated data, and testing integration and interoperability. So some of the people presenting earlier were basically talking about HL7 fire and other kind of messaging standards. That's effectively that's our bread and butter. How can we get lots of different systems to talk to one another? How can we figure out new business models for industry and organizations to cooperate around data sharing instead of competing? So in this model, just very quickly, and again, if you're interested in this, we can give you papers and videos and various other things around it. We implemented an open data exchange, which would be the healthcare equivalent of open banking. You as a user have full consent control over anything and everything that passes through that data exchange. This is akin to some of the data exchange stuff we've seen in some of the Chance stuff, but in our model, we're trying to go whole of life. We're saying, we are not going to be medical in this model. This is how can I, as a user, gather all of my assets together to allow me to get a better sense of how I can self-manage, right? And instead of the gajillion different portals that every organization is trying to get me to interact with, I'm going to ask them to log into me. Right? That's the kind of thought process, and this comes through very strongly in co-design. I want to tell my story once. Yeah, not fill in 14 forms in one hospital, not go to a social care organization and start a completely different conversation over all the same data. And so, you have a personal data store, that's yours, that travels with you, it goes everywhere you go, and you can have everything stored there, and you can pick a personal data store provider that you trust. Might be the government, might be a commercial organization, might be a not-for-profit. In our model, it's not-for-profit. We connect into Apple Health Kit, because that's where the energy is. If you connect to Apple Health Kit, Samsung Health, Google Fit, you've got about 3/4 of the consumer digital health marketplace in one swoop. Therefore, I can say that I can get blood pressure, weight measurements, sleep measurements, diet, all sorts of other things from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of devices that people can buy themselves, that people can get for Christmas presents, that we can distribute at a scale and at a price point vastly superior to what the NHS would be able to do. Now there is a pay barrier there. There's an equality issue here. We have to be cognizant of that, but there are ways around that. And then we can connect into clinical systems. And we can give someone their own diagnosis, we can give someone their own appointment records, we can give someone their medication, all is structured data. They can take that out of clinical systems, they can combine it with their data, and other people can offer them services on the basis of that combined data set. It might be their gym, it might be a community care organization run by a charity, it might be a pharmacy. We can't conceive of what the new model might be. Anyway, we've got videos online, so if you want to see more about that, you can go there. An example of the use of that infrastructure, I'm not sure if people are familiar with the work we're doing with Storm, Ken Sky and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, work around COPD monitoring. So this is people on home ventilation. So using a medical grade, home ventilation system and accompanying software, but then also combining that with patient reported outcome measures from an app, combining that with wearable data for physical activity and sleep, other mattress-borne sleep monitors for sleep quality if people don't want to wear a wearable overnight, and being able to gather together, and heart rate from the wearable as well, and being able to gather heart rate, outcome measures, ventilation use, oxygen consumption, and pull that all into one place and allow the clinician access to that. At the moment, we're not doing any fancy AI stuff, that's next. But right now, simply being able to see that multi-threaded set of data about someone's broader context helps us start to look at predicting and preventing hospitalization. In an asthma context, and this is where I'm going to start stretching a little bit, we haven't built this yet, but we've done the co-design work. And I used to have asthma, so I can sympathize with this point of view. The clinical group says you must use an inhaler and you must use a peak flow, and these are predictive of your control. I, as a user, say that doing a peak flow test makes me feel breathless, so I'm not going to do that. And I do everything in my power not to use an inhaler because I don't want to be seen using an inhaler. So I don't participate in either of the clinically effective components. Nonetheless, I will tell you when I'm going to have an amber day and when I'm going to have a green day, and I can tell you that within about an hour of waking up. Because I have my own methods, I know what works for me, I know what the triggers are. Okay? They're not clinically evidenced, but I bet I can predict my exacerbations better than you can. And I have about 40 variants of that story from people From everything from if I can swim 20 lengths in the pool first thing in the morning, I'm going to have a green day. If I can't, amber. If it's lower than 5 degrees outside, I'm going to have an amber day. If it's above, I'm going to have a green day. If I can sing the entire Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses in one breath in my car on my drive to work, I'm having a green day. If I can't, amber day. Now, this is the reality. This is what personalization looks and feels like. Unfortunately, we have no clinical evidence to that effect. But we can start to gather that clinical evidence because people can now give us that data. But only if it's consented, only if they're happy to do it, only if it's using familiar and conducive technologies, only if it doesn't make them go out of their way. If we give them a medical device to do it, we've probably got about 3 months of compliance, and then we start having to try and like pay them and incentivize them to do it. So we need to find out how to use their stuff to get them to give us context to allow us to personalize and predict. And in this particular model, what they've asked for, and the clinicians asked for the same thing, was instead of a routine appointment for people with asthma, where they try and describe to me 6 months ago how they sort of had a dodgy period, but they can't really remember it, and we have no frame of reference to have a conversation with, which both the patient and the clinician says is useless and a complete waste of time, but they have nothing else to do with that patient, so they keep bringing them back for appointments just because. They've said, well, if I as a patient can propose to you a rule that says, in these circumstances I am amber, can you as a clinician endorse that rule? And then when I can prove that I have met that rule, can I have a same-day appointment? And the clinician says, if we allow that to happen, I can take half of my patient load out of routine appointments and put them into this model, and that will free up the spots I need to offer same-day appointments to the people who are in the amber stage. And we can do that live. Okay? So when we talk about completely new models of care, it's kind of go big or go home. That doesn't work. Everything I've described won't work as a pilot. It'll only work if you take half of the population and put them into a new model. Last one, cardiac, working with the British Heart Foundation and a few health boards to start looking at using the same kind of thought process around a patient-generated composite data set. We were trying to figure out what use case we wanted to use, and then we realized that just about every single cardiac use case had the same basic data set. So the premise around the work we're doing with them is what is the high impact data set that we might get someone at risk to curate proactively and make available to the system. And that might be before they have a thing, or as a secondary prevention thing, or it might be a cardiac rehab thing on the way down from a hospital home care model. And so anyway, so that's 3 kind of example use cases of the way we work. What we're trying to do is dance across the top of all these things and share with everyone else the way to interoperate, the standards to use, the way to manage consent, the way to engage users, and generalize all of that so that we can start thinking about an ecosystem that isn't just about cardiac or frailty or COPD or whatever it may be, and we can start thinking about how do we get the user to contribute their story once, and how are we responsive to that story. And lastly, from an innovation hub point of view, this is for me the ultimate open ecosystem, because we're using the person, the patient, as the point of integration, and they're in control. This poses huge challenges for business models and challenges for how we organize and trust data. And as a result, any kind of open platform ecosystem, the orchestration is much more complex. So why are we interested in innovation hubs? Because we need them if we're going to figure out what the new organizational model is that allows us to pull these data sets together in a privacy respectful way and use that context to personalize and prevent. We want people to adhere to standards, and again, these innovation hubs could allow us to start helping people at the point of innovation to start deploying it against the same standards. So I'm not trying to retrospectively enforce things in an operational model. We're getting the standards into people's thought processes early. We need safe places to experiment and share knowledge. Absolutely critical. We shouldn't be racing to pilot. Most of the time, the pilots I'm involved in are just trying to build confidence. We don't need to go live to build confidence. And better joint strategy between partners. And ultimately, we need to find new multi-provider, multi-purchaser business models, because the data will come from many different places with many different interests and many different standards. And so we need all those people to cooperate and say, all right, 4 or 5 different people are going to pay for this intervention because they all get something out of it. And that's me. If you're interested, QR code or Google Care 4.0.